Welcome in on a Monday. I'm Reed Cowan. So two big breaking news stories. First, a jury has acquitted Daniel Penny in the chokehold death of Jordan Neely. Plus, developing news in that nationwide manhunt for the killer of UnitedHealthcare CEO. Police say they have a person of interest in questioning as we speak. You're watching CBS News 24/7. So when we see it, you see it. Let's get right to that breaking news off the top. The manhunt for the suspect that killed the CEO of UnitedHealthcare, Brian Thompson. CBS News confirming police in Altoona, Pennsylvania have a person of interest in for questioning. Now, also this is coming as we get breaking news that the New York City Police Department has announced a news conference for 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time in New York City at City Hall. What will they say? What could it be in relation to that questioning happening in Pennsylvania? We do not know. If these walls could talk, a lot might be forecast into what you will hear during this broadcast at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. You're looking live outside that police station in Altoona, Pennsylvania, where that person of interest is inside for questioning. CBS News senior coordinating producer and crime of public safety unit Anna Schecter is here with more on that breaking news. So for our viewers, let's just start building blocks one at a time. First of all, what's the difference between a person of interest and a suspect?
Well, a person of interest is someone that police want to question in relation to a crime, connected to a crime. A suspect is someone that they've determined committed the crime. And so, you know, we've seen a little bit of discrepancy. The FBI put out a flyer over the weekend calling him an unknown suspect. And now the sources that we are talking to are getting more and more confident that the man that they are questioning now in Altoona, Pennsylvania, is in fact the suspect, is the person who carried out the crime. There are a lot of clues. The fact that he was in possession of a gun with a silencer. They are checking to see if it was in fact the murder weapon. He was in possession of multiple fake IDs, including a fake New Jersey driver's license. And we know from our prior reporting that the person of interest who was wanted for questioning in connection to the murder, the person who you saw in those photos check into the hostel on the Upper West Side in Manhattan, he checked in using a fake New Jersey ID. So police are becoming more confident. NYPD is likely already in Altoona, if not almost there. This came in via a tip from a local McDonald's. Somebody in the McDonald's saw him and said, hey, that looks like the guy, and called local Altoona police. So it was a tip from the public that led to the questioning that is now underway at that Altoona Police Department that you just showed the viewers. Reed?
It really punctuates the power of getting these images like the one we're seeing right there on the screen out, because people do watch, they do see, and they do call in those tips. So let's play this out. Let's say that this is confirmed as being the suspect in the killing of Mr. Thompson there in New York, the UnitedHealthcare CEO. What happens after that questioning in Altoona, Pennsylvania? What's the process to get him into New York?
Well, he will actually have to make an appearance in Altoona. And what investigators have to do is lay out a timeline why they believe that he is the person. That leads to a warrant for an arrest and an arrest. And then that will pave the way for a transfer from Altoona police custody to NYPD custody, because this is an NYPD-led investigation that is a multi-state investigation. The U.S. Marshals are involved, so the fugitive task force that's comprised of Marshals and NYPD, they will be in charge of transporting him back to New York City to face charges in New York City for carrying out this murder in cold blood.
So let's talk about what led up to this questioning of this person of interest. And if you're just now joining CBS News 24/7, just to get you caught up, a person of interest has been taken into custody carrying a firearm that looks a lot like the firearm that we saw on that surveillance video, carrying a fake ID, which of course we know figures into this case. But let's play this out. It looks like this guy planned this and planned it very meticulously and had some expertise in planning. But at the same time, it's almost a double-edged sword, is it not? That meticulous, but New York City police were able to connect dot after dot after dot that seems to follow his planning.
That's right. And the surveillance footage has been key. So the fact that there are so many cameras, people have been asking, how is it that this guy could have gotten away with all the cameras? Well, what the cameras do is they capture the footage so that investigators then later can recover it and review it. And it takes time. They've reviewed thousands of hours of surveillance footage. And so they were able to piece together a map of exactly what he did once he exited that Port Authority bus terminal on the night of November 24th at 10 p.m. He cased the area around the Hilton Hotel where he carried out the attack, and then went up and checked into a youth hostel on the Upper West Side. 10 days later, they actually don't know. They don't have enough surveillance footage. They have him exiting the hostel, and then they have him again on a camera about 10 minutes later back at that Hilton Hotel area in front, and then surveillance camera right next to where the attack happened. It showed him pulling out the gun as soon as the victim walked by, shooting him in the back, and then shooting him several more times, killing him, and then staying outwardly calm and walking at a normal pace before he picks up the pace. And then other surveillance cameras showed him getting on a bicycle and riding north. So the surveillance cameras have been key to putting this all together. But they did not result in a facial recognition positive ID pop. So they ran his face. There's that one image of him from the hospital where you see his face, but because the angle was not head on, they couldn't determine the identity of that individual just by facial recognition alone. So while the technology has helped investigators, it wasn't a silver bullet immediately. And now we're 5 days later, and it was a person, a witness who saw him in the McDonald's that led to this questioning.
Well, and that figures into what we just got from one of our colleagues, Pat Milton, senior producer of the investigative unit for CBS News. You reported the McDonald's component to that, but I just want to go through for our viewers everything we are getting in real time. And the first part is what you've told us about. 2 law enforcement sources said that a person at that McDonald's restaurant called police after they saw a man who looked like the person of interest being sought by NYPD. So Pennsylvania police immediately got that tip. Now, the possible suspect, and they're saying possible suspect, is being held on an illegal gun charge while investigators work to confirm that he is the actual alleged gunman that killed UHC executive Brian Thompson. So that's interesting to report there, being held on a possible illegal gun charge. They also say, and this is also interesting, they'll be investigating through DNA evidence. There's a laptop computer and other evidence that has been gathered. So that DNA is all over those items. They'll be able to match that, hopefully, if this is their guy, to the DNA evidence you might remember that was collected at that Starbucks and at the hostel in New York. They say if the person of interest is confirmed as the suspect, he will not be immediately returned to New York, as there will be an extradition process. So let's really drill down on that. We want to ask you a little bit more on, oh, is she still with us? Anna, let's drill down on that, the DNA evidence. This is all about matching the evidence in that backpack or on that laptop with what they collected in New York, is it not?
That's right. So they collected a bunch of DNA evidence. They had multiple items. They had a power bar wrapper, a water bottle that was discarded at the scene. There was also a cell phone that was discarded. Unclear if that belonged to the suspect. But he also purchased a coffee and threw out that cup in a trash bin right outside the Starbucks near where he'd carried out the crime. And so that coffee cup was also sent back to a crime lab in Queens for DNA testing. So all of that DNA testing has been underway. They also were collecting fingerprints. But that's really helpful now. That process kicks in now. If this is, in fact, the suspect, they will match his fingerprints to what was, and his DNA to what was recovered on those items collected at the Starbucks, dropped at the scene of the crime. And then also, of course, they scraped his hostel room. This can be tricky, though, when there are other people staying in the room. DNA can be partial, fingerprints can, if you don't have a full fingerprint, just partial, it can be challenging. But with all these different pieces of the puzzles, investigators are confident that they can pin down and make a case for one individual carrying this out.
And, you know, that news conference at NYPD headquarters is expected in about 20 minutes. We urge our viewers to stay tuned for that, because as soon as those people step to the podium, we'll have our cameras fired up and you'll be able to see that live. But you've been covering cases like this for years. The NYPD does not hold a news conference like this unless they have something very solid.
That's right. So we'll wait and see, but all signs are pointing to that. In particular, since we have so many clues that we've been gathering over the last 5 days that appear to match what was the person of interest that's being questioned, what he was carrying and what he had on him when he was apprehended by local police in Pennsylvania, Reed.
All right, fascinating case, and once again, we are waiting a 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time news conference at NYPD headquarters there. And always great to talk to you. Thank you so much for being with us every step of the way. This is going to be very fascinating. So let's go live now to CBS News correspondent Skyler Henry. He's following the latest developments out of Atlanta. So right off the top, Skyler, I have to have you tell our viewers why you chasing this story sent you to Atlanta.
Yeah. Well, to follow up on Anna's reporting there, we know that U.S. Marshals from the Regional Fugitive Task Force, along with other members of the New York Police Department, have been here in Atlanta combing through video evidence from Greyhound bus stations like this one here in the city, trying to see if there is any connection to when the suspect got on the bus and made their way to New York. We know that the bus he was on originated from the city, but law enforcement officials say that they are still trying to figure out at which point exactly he got on the bus, whether that's here in Atlanta or other multiple stops that it takes to get from here to New York City. Also, developments that law enforcement officials say that they are paying attention to is whether that suspect got on another bus to come back here to Atlanta. Based off of the developments that we are seeing out of Pennsylvania, we haven't necessarily seen any sort of sway in terms of momentum, in terms of law enforcement presence from here in Atlanta to up towards Pennsylvania. We haven't seen many here at this Greyhound station, but we have been through other areas of interest throughout the city to see if law enforcement officials have combed through any particular areas, houses, businesses, to see if there's any sort of surveillance that could potentially connect who they see in that surveillance video from New York here to the city. We know that there was some presence here on the ground over the weekend. Obviously, things moving along here, new developments over the course of the last 20, 30 minutes or so, but officials wanted to make sure that they cover all their bases to try to pinpoint exactly who this is.
And you've been speaking to officials. You know, I started my day like you did, thinking that maybe we'd have some news out of Atlanta. It's almost whiplash to see this huge development out of the state of Pennsylvania. Are you getting any sense of surprise from authorities that you're talking there in Atlanta?
Well, that's been the interesting thing all along, Reed. Officials here in the city, whether that's the Atlanta Police Department, the Georgia Bureau of Investigations, FBI, all of those who may technically be a part of this investigation in terms of assistance, they've always said that New York, in terms of the NYPD, has been the lead investigative agency on this trail here. And so to see that it's been relatively quiet here today, not necessarily surprising, given the fact that they have sort of passed the baton, if you will, to the NYPD to allow them to take charge in this investigation. But to your point, a lot of the momentum that we thought that we would originally have seen here does not appear to be the case as of now. And obviously, to your point, things can sway, things can go as it relates to this investigation, given just the momentum and velocity with which these investigators are trying to find exactly where he might be. Again, those multiple stops along those Greyhound bus station routes, these multiple states, really this East Coast corridor, if you will, that we know that more than 80 law enforcement agencies have canvassed to try to pinpoint exactly where this suspect is. And given the fact that this has been really 5 days since this initial instance here, and the fact that this man could literally be anywhere. And so I think all of those things together really sort of just puts law enforcement really, in the seat of their pants, if you will, in terms of trying to keep up with this suspect. They have alluded to the fact that he does appear to be, sophisticated to some degree as it relates to how he's operated his weapon and the trail of clues that he's left behind. And so I think what we see out of Pennsylvania will absolutely be an incredible development. We'll see what happens in that press conference in a couple of minutes.
What a day. From New York to Atlanta to Pennsylvania, CBS News covering this crime story from top to bottom, and we will continue that coverage today at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Skyler, Henry, thank you so much for covering the Atlanta, Georgia angle of this story.